If you were to ask me which is the best video game that was released in the past 5 years, I would say Red Dead Redemption 2. And if you were to ask me which is the best video game that was released in the last decade, I would say Red Dead Redemption 2. And if you were to ask me which is the best video game of all time, including Club Penguin, I would say Red Dead Redemption 2. I know that there are still many who haven't played Red Dead 2 till now, and for their sake I would suggest that they play the game before continuing this video. However, if you wish to continue, then don't forget to subscribe the channel, it really helps. Red Dead Redemption 2 is the prequel to Rockstar's 2010 game Red Dead Redemption, which focuses on the trials and tribulations of the Dutch Vanderlyn gang. For these outlaws, the Wild West is on the verge of being tamed. The world that they knew is now slipping from under their feet, and so-called civilization is slowly taking over. At the start of the game, we see the gang trying to flee from the officials after being involved in a shootout at the town of Blackwater, which unfortunately resulted in the death of two gang members, Jenny Kirk and Davy Callender, and also an innocent bystander by the name of Heidi McCord, who was shot by Dutch so that the gang could escape. Though it may seem small, the death of Heidi McCord plays an important role in understanding the moral ambiguity surrounding not only Red Dead 2 but also the first game, as she is mentioned in both.
Do you remember Hattie McCourt's face? Who? She was a girl Dutch Vanderlyn shot in the head on that raid on the ferry a few years back. Same one you got shot on. Pretty girl, until her eye was hanging out by a threaded tendon and her brain was plastered over a wall.
The game puts the player in the shoes of Arthur Morgan, one of the founding members of the Dutch Vanderlyn gang. He was picked off from the street by Dutch Vanderlyn and Hosea Matthews as a teenager, and thus he viewed both of them as his father figures. Some years later, John Marsden was recruited into the gang and raised alongside Arthur, with both of them growing as close as brothers. Arthur's backstory is as big as the story of the main game, so I'm going to leave it for this video. The one trait of Arthur, however, that the players get to witness is his everlasting loyalty for the gang and its members. When John left the gang for a while and came back, even though he was welcomed by the rest of the gang, Arthur felt betrayed by his actions and a rift was formed between the two which steadily grew over the years, which is also quite visible from the beginning of the game where we get to save him. Like his true father figures, Arthur's character is a mixture of Dutch's brute, ambitious and arrogant personality and Hosea's self-aware nature. We often hear Arthur say that he is not a good man, but we often find a way to justify his actions. And yes, as a player we have the freedom to make good choices and increase the honor throughout the story, but it still doesn't make sense to see Arthur as someone who is good. But on the other hand, we also kind of believe that it would make sense to see him as a good man, particularly at the end of the game. I know that it is kind of confusing, but this was the same case with the other protagonists as well. When we took on the role of John Marsden in 2010, we ended up believing that he was on the right as well. Players loved him and some were even angry that we would be playing a different gang member in the prequel. Now it is safe to say that no one is going to complain. In Red Dead 2, we got to know that it was Arthur who made John the kind of man he was at the beginning of Red Dead Redemption. What made Arthur different was his moral self-awareness. The best way to understand this is by looking at the protagonist of Rockstar's other popular video game series, Grand Theft Auto. In GTA games, the biggest driving factor for violence is the concept of revenge. Cloud wanted revenge on Catalina. Tommy wanted revenge on Diaz and Lance. CJ wanted revenge on Ryder and Big Smoke. Nico Bellic wanted revenge on the guy who betrayed his unit in the war 10 years prior to the happenings of GTA 4. Michael wanted revenge on the guy who slept with his wife, and in the process he ended up destroying a home of a drug lord, hence violence. In the world of Red Dead, revenge was chosen as a major concept for Red Dead Revolver, the first of the 3 Red Dead games. In both RDR1 and RDR2, we know that the concept of revenge only appears during the epilogue, thus making us play a part in preparing the protagonist for his ultimate doom. And that is why the game takes a much more serious tone, as we are supposed to feel sad for both the protagonists as well as their victims. The world of Red Dead can't afford to satire its real life counterparts like GTA does. In RDR2, Arthur shares the same goal with Dutch at the beginning of the game, which is to live in a place where they are not shunned by the authorities and called outlaws, since they only stole from the rich and in some cases helped those in need. But as the Pinkerton National Detective Agency fortifies itself in the region, the actions performed by Vanderlyn gang become more questionable, particularly the death of Heidi McCord. Throughout the storyline and particularly towards the end chapters, we see the gang slowly branching out. Some leave, some stay, some rat out others, and some die. It all concludes in a standoff between the gang members with Dutch and Arthur on opposing sides. But much of the emotional substance present in Red Dead 2 is from Red Dead Redemption. In the epilogue of RDR 2, we get to play as John Marsden and end up getting revenge for Arthur's death. However, we also know the fate of John already. We know that by the end of the first game, he too was betrayed by Edgar Ross, who made him kill the remaining gang members Bill Williamson, Javier Escuela, and Dutch Vanderlyn. By the end of both of these games, the Vanderlyn gang is completely wiped out, save for a few who were able to leave this Wild West lifestyle behind. But in the end, Jack Marsden also got involved in the revenge storyline that ends with him killing Edgar Ross while fishing. The end scene is a nice foreshadowing on Rockstar's part, as we see in RDR 2 where Ross says this to little Jack.
Enjoy your fishing, kid, while you still can.
Seeing how the first Redemption game wrapped up, the story went full circle with Jack assuming the same lifestyle as his father. During the end of RDR 2, Arthur sacrificed his life to help John run away, thus foreshadowing John's trial attempt at leaving behind his outlaw past. But in the end, John sacrificed his life so that Jack could run away. However, it is safe to say that they didn't succeed in their efforts. This is what makes the redemption arc of Red Dead a great example of video game storytelling, because there is no running away. It leans more towards reality in the case of its outcome. Unlike GTA where violence has some recompensation, in the world of Red Dead Redemption, we see both of the protagonists trying their best to be self-aware of their violent actions, and the story reflects on it. In the epilogue of Red Dead Redemption, we can notice that even though a low-honor Jack can make dark jokes whenever he kills someone, he also shows different signs of disgust at himself. However, there is still one question that is left to be answered. Did these protagonists actually fail, or did they redeem themselves by simply dying? And if they died, then who is the one that is actually redeemed? Is it them or their victims? Both of their deaths finally boils down to their loyalty and faith. Arthur's loyalty proved to be his doom, and John's faith in Edgar Ross proved to be his. As for Jack, the future is still unclear. However, you can imagine him getting captured or killed after the story of Red Dead Redemption, since he practically asked everyone about Edgar Ross, and that won't be suspicious if they ever find Ross's body.